Hey guys, and welcome to the second episode of Memetaa TV. Hopefully I sound a lot more awake this time. I'm sorry about last time, I sound a little tired. But from this point out, I kind of wanted to try starting the actual tutorial series part of this series, where I want to address, the actual system and the characters, and really talk about things that are more relevant to people who are waiting for the US release, who haven't touched the game yet, and who really want to know, how to play this game, and know the fundamentals before they maybe step into it. And before I actually made a system tutorial, I was originally going to do this tutorial after it, but I decided this is kind of like a core idea of kind of choosing your character if you're not familiar with the series. So I'm going to do a tutorial about the style system, which is kind of the embedded way that they divided up characters. Each character has their own different move lists and their own different set of skills, but the style really determines how you're going to play your character, and it really is governed towards what kind of playstyle you like, what kind of maybe fighters you like, if you like combos, if you like simple playstyles, like spacing and outwitting your opponent, or if you just like to be tricky. Things like that will all kind of determine what character you might pick in the end, if you're not just hunting for a strong character. But from the get-go, there are, let me make sure I get all the character styles right. There is Hanaman, there is Vampire, there is the Pillarman, in other words mode, there are stand users, and there's Horseback. So there are 5 different styles that we're aware of right now. Some of the DLC characters, especially some of the late incoming ones, might use different style types. I'm assuming there's going to be a 6th one with Bow, but that is for the future, and for right now these are the unique style types we know of right now. So from the get-go, I'm just gonna go one by one and kind of take you through what each style plays like, what your style button actually does, and what mechanics you have that the other styles don't. So, just kind of sit back, take stock of what is here, and, maybe use it later on to pick what character you want. Alright guys, to start off, let's just go right into Hanaman characters. Now, Hanaman characters are kind of like the strong fundamental type of characters in this game. They really have no real sophisticated tactics that some of the other characters have, and for people that play maybe Street Fighter 4, a lot of the mechanics that they have will be very, very familiar to you. And your objective with them is, you just kind of your speed, you're usually fast. I believe they're faster than most of the cast. Your range isn't really as good. Actually, like characters like Jonathan, a lot of complaints are that his range is actually pretty crappy. But other than that, you hit really hard, and you can do a lot more damage in one combo than most with no gauge. And then if you start using gauge, then your combos will actually scale up pretty high. In the end, yeah, you maybe use less gauge than most characters to get out damage, so it's kind of nice. You do hit a lot harder, and like I said, the speed is kind of nice, I always like playing Jonathan just because my movement feels a lot better than any of the stand characters. So the best way to describe them is they're simple. They're very much the starter characters of the game. If you're just getting into it, picking up any of the Hanaman characters is a great way to get into it. It maybe won't teach you some of the other tactics, but at least just learning, how to navigate the game properly. It's a good way to start. And especially if you're new to fighting games, and you just happen to decide to start with this maybe because you're a Jojo fan, then the Hanaman character is definitely the way to go for you. And I know a lot of people that are started the game actually started on Joseph or Jonathan or Caesar, because they're kind of the strong members of the Hanaman team. So, for Hanaman characters, I guess I'll just mention the style button for since nobody watching this might know about it. Style button is kind of separate from your other normal attacks. It's set to R1, I believe, for controllers, and if you're using an arcade stick, I'm not sure what the default setting is for the arcade setups. Personally, I have it set on my thumb, so right in the very bottom left of my stick, because I kind of like having it in a handy place, especially since you use it a lot for a lot of the styles. But for Hanaman characters, say you just press your style button normally, you actually get to charge gauge, which, is really nice because Hanaman characters are pretty gauge heavy. You will eat up a lot of gauge using your combos. So it is one of their strong points. You do get gauge charge, and it's a little slow, but every little bit counts. And why is gauge so important to Hanaman characters? Well, that's because, you know, you have your normal command moves, so like, say you do this with Jonathan, that's 151, or let's see this instead, this is a better display. Okay, so say you do that, it's like 106, or yeah, that move 68. Say you actually, instead of using light, medium, or heavy for the attack, you use your style button to do the command instead. That does 90 damage now. So basically, if you play Street Fighter 4, it's the equivalent of an EX move. Using your style button to execute it just turns it into an EX move. Properties change, and for some moves like Luck and Pluck, it boosts the damage. For like Jonathan's projectile, you actually get a launch off of it, which is pretty good for combos. So, you know, I believe his sure you can actually get invincibility frames, like a ton of them, if you do it like that. So, you know, just like any game, you get your EX moves, which I believe a lot of people are familiar with now in the day and age because they become pretty popular in fighting games from, you know, Street Fighter 4 and on. I believe we've seen them in almost every game now. And they've been in there before. I mean, I'm not saying that that was what invented it, but ever since then, I feel like I've seen them in almost every game I've played. That's about it for, you know, basic ideas. Here's, you know, one of the more fan story oriented kind of things. Hanaman attacks, you know, like the actual EX ones, not your normal moves. But these will do additional damage to any of the vampires and the pillar men. So on the character select screen, you'll notice certain characters who have the little mask symbol that's like above, like right by their portrait on the actual select, and if you're hovering over them, then on, you know, whatever side you're on, right above like where it says player 1 or player 2, you'll see a little icon that's like a mask. Any character that has that, they actually take additional damage from your EX moves or your supers, I believe. So it's not a huge difference from what I remember. I mean, in long combos you'll actually kind of see the damage difference. But it's not something to worry about, it's nothing to discourage you or encourage you from like counterpicking, but it's something to be aware of. Outside of that, you know, there's not much else to talk about Hanaman characters. Like I said, they're really easy to play, they're easy to pick up, and because of that, their combos are really easy to do. Okay, so I can't do any Jonathan combos, but he does have quite a few, and they're not really, really hard. I mean, a lot of characters that just use Hanaman can do basic ground combos, and you don't even have to worry about launching. But, you know, you do have a pretty basic variety. It's not very, I mean, people who really like, I don't know, creative and maybe really interesting looking combos maybe won't like Hanaman so much because they're kind of really basic, they don't look that exciting, and they're kind of really just kind of loops. So, you know, you just kind of do the same move over and over again and kind of cancel it and go to the same, you know, loop it over and over again. You know, that's kind of like the basic idea of a lot of Hanaman combos. But, you know, just in case you're big on, you know, doing really interesting and really getting really creative and stylish with your combos, maybe Hanaman characters won't appeal to you once you get really good. But to start off, you know, it's a great way to kind of learn, you know, how to do your chains, how to, you know, cancel into special moves, how to get maybe basic aerial juggles down, that kind of stuff. You know, there's no reason not to play them, and, you know, they're so simple that I believe, like, really anybody can pick up and play them very well. So, you know, if you're a really fundamentals kind of person, Hanaman's, you know, definitely the character type for you. And, you know, that's about it. And from here on, I will go on to the next exclusive style, which is vampires. Alright, so next on our list of the styles is Vampire. Now, Vampire isn't, I know it's kind of odd to talk about because there's actually only one character who has this style, and that is Dio from Phantom Blood. But, you know, it is technically considered a separate style, and, you know, he is a pretty popular character, so it is important to kind of talk about him. So Vampire, you do have quite a few traits that you should know about. First is you actually, let me see. I wish I knew something that caused good white life damage. Okay, so see that little bit of damage there that's actually white instead of red? That's basically recoverable health in this game. Only Vampire and Mode characters actually have this right now. or anybody who basically has a vampire trait. So actually, Dio, who is a stand character from Stardust Crusaders, actually has this ability as well. But, you know, that aside, it's basically just reserved for vampire and style mode. It's, you know, it's kind of there. It's not a huge thing to worry about because White Life, even though you do lose some actual damage out of it, characters actually do take a bit of additional damage because of it. It's just they can actually recover it over time. It doesn't automatically start refilling. There's actually a fixed amount of time before it'll start recovering. I'm not sure the exact amount of time myself. I know it's quite a few seconds. So you do have to run away a bit if you want to actually recover it, or at least defend properly. So be aware of it, but you know, don't be too reliant on it. Like if you have a huge chunk of White Life that you want to recover, then I do recommend that you actually try running away and maybe getting it back. But outside of that, it's not a huge thing to worry about, and most of the time it's really minuscule outside of really long combos. So that's one of your traits. You know, you do have recoverable health that nobody else in the game has naturally. There are certain moves that'll only cause white health damage, but that's per character, and this is a universal thing, or a universal thing that all moves will give you a bit of white health damage. So there is that, and okay, as for your style button, if you actually try pressing it normally with Dio as a vampire, you actually won't get anything, and that's because it is basically a follow-up to certain moves. So for Dio, like certain moves like this, you can hit your style button afterwards, and you get that. So what is that? That's actually a health drain. Alright. So say I hit style after that, and you can actually mash this for a ton more damage. You actually steal health if you just like pay attention to the health bar up there. You can actually see that you get a decent amount back. So that's just if you press style button. So the other cool thing you can do is, instead of that, hit style button a Hadouken motion. So quarter circle forward, and then X instead of just, or not X, style. So say do this, and then do that, so quarter circle forward and style. If you notice, you're not recovering health, but if you look below, you're actually recovering gauge. And gauge steal is actually the optimal reason people really like Dio, because you steal a lot of gauge. Because if you notice, I got to 3 very, very easy, just by stealing maybe twice. So, you know, without, you know, landing big combos, you can get gauge, and then just turn that gauge into big damage. So that's basically what makes Vampire strong, is your ability to either choose to take health from enemies, like this, or if you're not suffering from any health problems, then you just choose to steal gauge, which doesn't cause any additional damage, by the way. Oops. You'll see that isn't causing damage, it's just causing gauge right there. But, you know, that's your big thing. You can choose either, if you're at advantage, to steal gauge, in which case you can extend your lead by performing really heavy combos, or you can choose to steal health back, in which case, you know, it makes it hard for your enemy because they have to get all that damage back on you, while worrying about the fact you just stole all their health from them. But that's basically all there is about it to Vampire. I mean, it's not a very complicated thing, and like I said, it's basically just Dio who has the ability to use it. But, you know, it is a very strong, you know, Dio is easily one of the A-class, maybe even S-class characters in the game right now. For various reasons, you know, that's not necessarily related to health drain and gauge drain, but those definitely do help him and bring him up a lot. So if you're a very offensive character, or an offensive player, or maybe just someone that relies a lot on kind of the flow, or changing the flow of battle, then Vampire is a pretty good thing, because you can kind of run the flow of what you do based on where you're standing against your opponent. And you can change the flow very quick by just stealing enough health or gauge and then turning into big damage later. And that's about it, and next we'll get on to the style characters, or the mode characters, I mean, the mode style. Alright guys, so the next style we'll be covering are the mode characters. Now, as I already mentioned before, mode characters do behave like Vampire in that they do get white health. So I'm in training mode this time, so you can actually see the recover proper. But, you know, same idea, you do get white health that you can recover if you want. and actually some of the like ACDC, I believe, on his heart heat attack does recover health, because he does steal health as well. But that's kind of, you know, per character thing again. But some of them do have that ability, but it's not a built-in thing that's according to your style. Now, basically the same as any of the previous characters I covered, you know, you're still pretty simple, you know, you have big range. Actually, a lot of the Pillar Men do have pretty devastating range, so any of the mode characters, which is all a whopping 3 of them, you have pretty wild range, and you do hit really hard. And why is this? It's because you are the gauge hungriest characters in the game. Mode characters, essentially, here's how it works. If you hit your style button, you activate your mode. And it's depending on each character. I'm using ACDC because I play him, so I'm most familiar. If you notice, your gauge is slowly draining, and it does drain pretty fast once you hit X. And say your gauge actually runs out, you do have a cooldown. So this actually, if you hit X, as long as it's just your normal mode, you can deactivate at any time to stop it. And if you do this, you have remarkably less cooldown than if you let your gauge run out, in which case you do have a force cooldown whenever it runs out. So if you choose to activate your style, which you probably will every once in a while, because it does give you quite a few abilities, you do have to watch your gauge, because if it runs out and something like this happens when you're standing right next to your opponent, you are probably going to eat a full combo because of it. Now, what's the benefit of activating style? From the base, it usually changes properties on most of your special moves, so for ACDC, you have like this move right here. So that normally does 175, which isn't anything to laugh at, but if you activate style, you suddenly are doing 208, and if you look at the range on it, it suddenly changes drastically from what it was before. So all your moves do change when your mode is on, and actually for all mode characters, while you are in mode, you can activate a further power-up, which this. Not only, I mean, okay, let me try and show this off better. So the cool thing about this is it not only really powers you up, but it can act as a effective cancel in your combos. So say you do this. Maybe that'll work. Oh, okay, maybe not. Okay, so see, that's suddenly a combo now because of that cancel, which isn't anything that amazing. But what's like kind of cool about ACDC in this mode is he actually causes white health damage as he's standing next to an opponent and as he's kind of hitting you. So even if you're just close to your opponent, like just while you're in this form, you are actually causing white damage, which actually doesn't show up in training mode, but it will show up in versus. So this is one of the cool things. It, again, depends on what character you're using. The downside to if you choose to activate your powered up mode is your gauge does, I believe, I'm not sure why it's not doing it here, drain a little bit faster than if you had just activated on normal mode, but you can't deactivate it. You cannot, unless you can hear me correctly. So, you know, you can activate directly if you do it like this, aka just press style, but if you activate your super version of it, you are stuck in that, so you have to commit to it if you're going to do it. So watch your gauge, and, you know, make sure if you're going to run out, that, you know, you've caused some kind of knockdown so your opponent can't punish you for it after you fall out. So like that. So that's your biggest thing. Mode characters are really powerful. Wham is probably, maybe still is, I'm not sure about after this patch, one of the highest ranked tier characters in the game just because of the pure damage you get even without activating mode. So they are very scary characters, and, you know, they're a little tricky to play because you have to be really careful with your gauge management. But, you know, I think they're really cool. I really like the system, and, you know, maybe in the next patch they might change them a little bit to make them a little less, I don't know, find a way to make it so even if you're gauge hungry, you can use mode a bit more effectively, because I feel like most people when they play these characters don't really take advantage of your mode enough, just because it costs so much gauge, and you'd rather just spend on, you know, like heart heat attacks and just raw damage for cancels. But, you know, I would like to see it used more. I mean, I believe they do have uses, especially like ACDC's when you activate his super version and get the slow drain on health. It can be something that I think does a lot of damage. You know, I've done combos with this that have totaled up a pretty high amount of damage just because of the white life. So, you know, I think it's something cool. Whether or not people will try and utilize it is up to them, but that's basically the style, you know. If you kind of like playing, or if you're better with gauge management, or you just like pure power characters, that's basically all the mode characters. And they're, you know, they're just kind of fun. They have a lot of really interesting traits, and, you know, if you want to play top tier, then always pick Wham. So that's about it, and next we will get to the big feature, which are the stand users. Alright guys, so the next target on our list are the stand characters. Now, stand characters make up basically most of the cast. They are probably the most interesting for people who are into combos, and definitely the most complicated of all the casts because you do have a lot of mechanics that you have to manage. But for the most part, they're very interesting to play, and, you know, if there's one thing that, you know, most people know about Jojo, it's the stands. So, if you had played maybe the Capcom Stardust Crusaders game, you'll be familiar with a lot of mechanics. They're very similar to, you know, there's a few similar ones to what you've seen before. Okay, so your style button for stand characters does call your stand. And once you have your stand on, you basically get, you know, extended range because obviously your stand will attack for you. At that same point, I mean, obviously it means that you are extra vulnerable at a certain range because if your stand gets hit, you know, even out of attacks. So, you know, like say your stand goes out for some kind of attack. Okay, what am I doing? Say you have your stand out for any sort of attack, or it's trying to do an attack animation, you know, your stand does have a hurt box. So it can be stopped, as opposed to just you getting hit. Other than that, for some characters it does affect your jump height. I believe, like for Josuke, it will affect your jumping. I don't think it's as evident in Polnareff, but for some characters it does affect your jumps, so it might screw up certain combos. Obviously the range on all your attacks do change, and when you have stand on, this is basically universal for all stand characters. Very few characters with stand on have great crossovers, and it is mostly with stand off. So, you know, like for Polnareff, his jumping mid is actually really good for cross-ups, but anything with his stand, and actually in general, his jumping normals with his stand are really, really bad. So you do sacrifice some things, but, you know, all in all, you're not about your jumping game when you have stand on. Maybe air to air, you actually do have a few options. But for the most, you'll probably want to stay grounded and rely on your fact that you have really great range. Right. So from there, I guess it's about the actual dedicated mechanics. So I'll talk about one of the new ones that was added into the game recently by the new patch, which is QSO, or Quick Stand On. So Quick Stand On is kind of interesting. If you're doing like a normal string like this, so light, medium, heavy, and say you hit your style button, you call your stand instantly. And this basically acts as a cancel. It costs 1 gauge, so it is a little costly, but it is a really quick, really fast way to get your stand on. And yeah, wait one second. Let me see if I can show this off. Alright, so say your opponent was guarding. Come on. Okay, so let's see if I can do this. Back to player 2. And not hit that. Okay, so I wish I had more hands so I could do this properly, but there you go. Basically it can make a string safe, like say you do something really stupid and you, I don't know, for whatever reason you don't want to just do a normal boosting cancel. You can actually do stand on, and then you do get stand on from there. So it does give you some extra pressure, and I'm not sure if you actually will get enough frame advantage that you can actually poke before your opponent can counter hit you. But it is something, and for a lot of characters it does have some pretty interesting combo potential. Valentine, for example, has a very high damage combo now because of it, which is really cool. I tried with Polnareff actually, and I know I thought I said that I might be able to get something, but as far as standing combos go, he doesn't activate fast enough. So it does depend on your character's stand activation on whether you can use it in combo parts or not. But it is an interesting mechanic. and it can be an alternate way to make strings safe that don't involve this. So your normal mechanics that were here before is stand rush, or often abbreviated SR if you do it in combos. But what this is, it's kind of like how, what was it, tandems worked in the Capcom game. So if you remember, tandems were like you entered a certain mode where you could send out various commands, you know, usually strings that your stand would perform, and you could move freely during it. Stand rush is basically, there are various special moves that certain characters have. For Polnareff, it's his DP attack. You can do that. So what does this do? Once that's moving, or once you see this little white flash, which means you stand rush, then you can actually move your character as you want. So how do you do this? During an attack that you can actually stand rush, so during this animation, on various frames you can hit your style button, and you will, you know, flash white, and then you can go and do your movement. So this is really important for stand characters because it is how you do a lot of combos. But you do have to remember the thing about stand rushes. If you do this, you can only use your moves that do not require a stand. So for Polnareff, his standing H, say I do this, and I try to do standing H, my medium will come out. So any attack that is lower, the immediate attack that is lower, so say I do this, and I try and do a standing or a jumping heavy. So what should have came out was this, but I got a jumping medium instead. That's because it'll automatically perform an attack that doesn't require a stand, but is the next highest level. So you do have to remember this, that until your stand comes back to you, you cannot use it at all. So this is the weakness of stand rush, and how you kind of have to think about it in combos, because there are times people will like try and stand rush, and then they are trying to get a string like this, and suddenly this standing heavy won't come out. It's probably because the stand hasn't fully returned yet. The only way to actually get around this is, say you stand rush something, if you do a Poutsin, your stand will automatically come back, but it won't actually be activated, because how this works is, once you stand rush, then that cancels your stand, so you do have to call it again. And basically, if you're trying to get a combo out of it, you can't rely on any stand moves after that. You have to rely on whatever you have in your standoff form. So it is a little complicated in a way, but once you kind of start doing combos, you'll kind of figure out how to do it. Let me see if I can do the Polnareff one. Oh, okay, I missed. I believe I call myself a Polnareff player. You have to remember these combos haven't been really valid for a while, so I haven't actually been using Polnareff that much. Oh well. Well, you kind of get the idea. Maybe not. But, you know, that's kind of how it works. It's interesting for combo parts, if nothing else, and for a lot of characters like Jotaro and maybe Okuyasu, you do get certain unblockable setups by using your stand rush correctly. So it's an interesting mechanic. It can be used in a lot of ways that aren't just for combos, depending on your character. So, you know, kind of find out what moves you can stand rush, and kind of look into what it actually, you know, gives you, or how you actually can move after it, and if you can set up unblockables, if it's good for combos, etc. What I did forget to mention is calling your stand. You do actually have a certain amount of vulnerability, I believe, during it. Oh, why am I hitting that? Okay, maybe not entirely, but yeah, when you're calling your back your stand and calling your stand, you are a little vulnerable. So it's not completely safe, but it's a pretty quick animation anyway, that it'll take like an inhuman kind of thing for someone to punish you. But say you're trying to do it like and a projectile is about to hit you, it'll probably hit you and you won't be able to guard in time. But, you know, it's a minor detail. And the other important thing to remember, if you have stand on and you get hit by a sweep or anything that causes a hard knockdown, you will actually lose your stand. So throws as well. If you get thrown, no stand anymore. So those are like the various ways you'll lose it. Say you also get soft knockdown and you don't tech, you will also lose your stand since that registers as a hard knockdown. But that's about it, and oh yeah, since most stand users have their stand perform the throw, you can only perform throws when your stand is with you. So if you're doing a stand rush, for example, you can't throw. So that's another thing to remember. And if you haven't noticed, your stand or your throw range does change as well when your stand is out, and your stand can get grabbed. So your stand's or your grab hitbox is actually your stand. So I believe that's about it. You know, it's a very finicky style, but it's also very cool. I mean, this is, you know, kind of what everybody really gets into JoJo about, is all the cool stands, and there are a lot of different varieties. You know, not all of them function like the kind of where they kind of move like this. There are some that, like Whole Horse, Mista, that have special functions that are very character specific, so I don't want to go into every single one of them. I believe Narancia also has some very interesting properties when he does his stand. So, you know, it's from character to character sometimes on how your stand will behave once you call it, or if it calls properly, or if it's just used for moves. But it's, you know, an interesting system that, you know, maybe people who played the third game will be familiar with. There are some things that kind of carry over. Luckily you can't get stand crushed. Like, if you play the third game, there's no such thing as stand crush in this, so you don't have to worry about not being able to call your stand. But there are some demerits to it, and obviously you don't have tandem attacks anymore. So, you know, here and there are differences, but it's still interesting enough, and, you know, stand users do have probably the most interesting combos in the game, so if you are very combo savvy, I recommend that you check them out and try playing with them. And with that, we will get to the last portion where we will talk about the Horseback characters. Alright guys, we finally reached the end of this very long, kind of drawn out, I'm sorry for maybe waddling around and explaining things for too long. But this is kind of the last portion where I'm just going to talk about the Horseback characters, who aren't very, you know, super unique, but I believe they do deserve discussion. So for all Horseback characters, you do start the round, and you can freely, you know, before the round starts, call, and if you want to get off your horse, you can get off your horse. But, you know, as you can see, Horseback characters not obviously do get to ride on a horse. And what does this mean? You have ridiculous range. Horseback characters, you know, basically are really dominant because they have this kind of range. You know, if you see Gyro's jumping B, it's really crazy. And this can hit air to air like crazy as well. And, you know, the infamous, you know, horse legs blows are pretty ridiculous, and this is too. So your range is probably the highest in the game, better than a stand even. So, you know, horses are greater than stands, you know, this game has taught us. But, you know, you're really fast, you have great normals, and you do kind of do a pretty decent amount of damage. And oh yeah, here's the other detail about horse users, or when you're on horseback, you cannot be thrown. You are completely immune to any throws, so that is what makes you incredibly strong, is that you can avoid throws and you can rely on, you know, stylish moves, etc. And kind of be really campy, or not campy, but defensive with it, because, you know, you don't have to worry about throws, you only really have to worry about people coming in, and you have such range that you can easily keep people from getting in. Now, if you hit your style button, you get off your horse. Why would you ever want to? Well, there's always the odd case that someone will knock you off, aka, you know, I don't think it's hard knockdowns can actually knock you off, but if you do get hit enough, you will get knocked off your horse. Or maybe not, maybe you just never get knocked off. Okay, I know. Like so, you might get knocked off, in which case you're stuck on foot, and you're powerless without your powerful horse. If you hit your style button again, you can call your horse. Now the thing is, if you're trying to call your horse, for the first few frames that you're actually calling it, you are pretty vulnerable, and you can't do anything about that. So you can't call your horse when you're right in front of somebody, but after a bit, like once you start getting there, you do get super armor. So Once you actually have the animation of you standing on the horse, you don't have to worry. But up until, you know, the horse actually gets to you, you are pretty vulnerable. So be careful, especially like for Johnny players. This is pretty frightening and can actually be very dangerous. For the most part, horse characters are pretty threatening because of the fact that they have all this armor. And I guess I can just talk about this now. For characters from the 7th arc, aka Gyro, Johnny, so the 2 Horseback characters, and Valentine actually, you might have noticed I picked up these random glowing things across the map. What these are basically exclusive to Horseback characters and Valentine from the 7th arc of Jojo. Collecting each part will actually up your properties, so you get actually higher attack power, higher defense, stuff like that. For Gyro, he does have a special thing. If you collect all 3, you actually notice that meter now at the bottom is filled up. That'll stay filled up forever, and actually it's a huge attack buff for him. So Gyro gets pretty scary, and all 3 of the characters get pretty scary. Now, to pick them up, you know, if you notice, you have to crouch down to pick them up. And they don't appear immediately at the start of a battle, unlike in training mode. They kind of appear over time in the course of a round, so you kind of have to be on the lookout for them. And you do have to watch out, because if you're both playing characters from the 7th, you do share the same parts, so you will be fighting over them. And say you get hard knockdown, you will drop them. Now other characters that aren't part of the 7th arc can't pick them up, they can just kind of hover around them and keep you from picking them up. And they can always just keep on doing hard knockdowns to knock them out of you. So at the most, they're really hard to actually get all 3. But, you know, if you can, and you know, you might as well always be trying if you can get the space and time to do so. They are a really big buff to your characters, especially like Valentine has really low health, but he gets the huge defensive buff if he collects all 3 parts, and he becomes projectile invincible. So, you know, there are merits to them. And you definitely should be gunning for them if you are playing that, and if you are fighting, you know, like Gyro versus Johnny, you should at least be trying to keep your opponent from collecting all 3 as well. So this isn't actually necessarily related to style, but I figure I might as well talk about it since I talked about the white life kind of properties as well. But that's about it for Horseback characters. I mean, in the end, they just kind of play simple. I mean, they are technically stand characters because you have stands, but those only come out depending on attacks, and basically your stand is your horse. And it actually functions better than most of the stands, so, you know, if you like super armor, if you like, you know, having ridiculous range, or if you maybe just like horses, you know, Horseback characters are pretty strong. And I know a lot of people that are pretty fond of them just because of the pure strength you kind of have by using it. So that about covers everything. You know, I just kind of wanted to use this as a way that people could maybe, who aren't familiar with JoJo and, you know, had a character set in mind that they want to play, have a better idea of, like, what the characters play like in general, you know, at a general idea, and kind of narrow it down, like, oh, you know, I like simple stuff, so I'm going to play a Hanaman character. You know, I like the idea of not having to deal with throw breaks, so I'm going to choose one of the Horseback characters. I like interesting combos, so I'm going to choose a stand character. Or, you know, maybe I like the idea of having all these extra abilities like unblockables, extra speed and attack, or health drain, so I'm going to play one of the mode characters. Or I want to jump around like a monkey and steal everybody's health, I'm going to play a vampire character. You know, that kind of thing I wanted to kind of take care of before I, you know, went into the very, very basics of style. So, you know, that about covers it. And, you know, it turned out a little longer than I thought. I'm kind of sorry, but I'm glad I was able to kind of cover everything, and I give a really good idea, at least I think I did, of what each style kind of plays like. So, as always, you know, comment, rate, do whatever, give me feedback, etc. Give me ideas of what to do next. If not, I will just kind of like go about my way and kind of slowly but surely make content before, you know, ASB's evident release in the US. And I will probably continue making whatever the heck I want on the Japanese side, based on some of the new characters and whatever odd combos and weird things that happen while I'm playing. So until next time, I guess I will see you guys. Thanks for watching.